Hello and welcome. This week we have the message from Tony Randall on a day that started with power problems in the church, but we fixed those and were able to carry on. Tony took us on a journey from disbelief to proclamation through the final chapter of Mark. I hope you find this podcast interesting. If you do, give us a like so we know. God bless. See you next time.
Imagine your group chat. Someone drops a text with a massive reality-altering news update. What happens? Nobody believes the first person who texts it, right? You wait for a second source. Okay, let's unpack this. Today in our deep dive, we are exploring a fascinating sermon covering the final chapter of the Gospel of Mark.
Right, yeah.
And we are basically looking at a group of terrified skeptics dealing with the ultimate unbelievable update.
The context here is just so crucial. I mean, Jesus has just been crucified. The tomb is empty. But the disciples, they aren't investigating. They're completely disconnected from the reality of the situation.
Yeah.
They're just hiding, basically paralyzed by trauma.
Which makes perfect sense, you know? Their reality was just totally fractured. And what blows my mind is how the actual physical text we have reflects that exact same fracture.
Oh, absolutely.
Like the oldest ancient manuscripts of Mark just stop abruptly at verse 8. The women flee the tomb in bewildered terror, and that is it.
Right. It is a total cliffhanger. What's fascinating here is who Mark likely was. Historical context suggests he was the young man from a well-connected family who famously fled naked when Jesus was arrested.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. And he later compiled these accounts from Peter. So he intimately understood that impulse to just, run away terrified.
But as an author, why leave the ending that chaotic? Are we looking at a lost page, or is the unresolved text literally mirroring the psychological chaos of the disciples in that exact moment?
That's the core of it, really.
Yeah.
A traumatized mindset triggers a fuse defense mechanism. I mean, their brains simply cannot process the impossible sequence of events unfolding.
Right.
So when Jesus intentionally appears to specific people, the disciples' cognitive dissonance kicks in, and they just flat out reject the reports.
Take Mary Magdalene. She is the first one he appears to. And the sermon notes she was a moderately wealthy supporter who had been freed from 7 demons. So if you're a terrified disciple, you are probably looking at her history of severe mental or spiritual trauma and thinking, well, she's not exactly a reliable witness right now.
Precisely. Then the sequence continues. He appears to 2 followers walking on the Emmaus road. And they don't even recognize him until the familiar act of breaking bread finally snaps them out of their own cognitive fog.
And they rush back to Jerusalem to report this, but the disciples still refuse to believe it.
They are completely dug in.
Okay, I get being scared, but if multiple separate people come to me saying the guy I just saw die is walking around, at some point my curiosity has to override my fear.
You'd think so.
It's like an Easter egg hunt. If one kid yells out they found candy, maybe you doubt them. But when 3 kids show up with chocolate on their faces, you start looking. Why were these guys so stubbornly dug in?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it's about how the brain handles shattered expectations. When your worldview has just violently collapsed, accepting good news feels incredibly dangerous.
Oh, because getting your hopes up is too risky.
Exactly. Hope is terrifying if you've just been traumatized. Gentle, secondhand evidence isn't enough to pierce that armor, which is why, when Jesus finally appears to them himself, he doesn't comfort them.
Wait, really?
Yeah, his very first action is a strict telling off for ignoring the eyewitnesses.
So a harsh reality check is what actually works. Why would a severe reprimand succeed where actual eyewitness testimony failed?
Because a sharp, authoritative reprimand shocks the system. It completely bypasses that trauma-induced feedback loop of doubt and self-pity.
It forces them to snap out of it.
Right. It demands immediate attention and forces them out of the defensive paralysis.
Here's where it gets really interesting. That sharp shock actually leads to a massive behavioral pivot. After the reprimand, he commissions them to proclaim the good news.
And the text notes that doesn't mean becoming a professional preacher behind a pulpit. It just means sharing what you saw.
And they do. These paralyzed, stubborn skeptics actually obey. They leave that locked room and spread the message everywhere,
Ultimately transforming into a global movement.
The founders of this massive faith were originally its biggest skeptics. So what does this all mean for you? It is a challenge to look in the mirror. How often do you refuse to accept new information, no matter how much evidence there is, simply because the implications scare you?
That is the real takeaway. And circling back to that abrupt ending we talked about earlier, well, this raises an important question.
Then listen.
If Mark's original manuscript truly stopped at verse 8, with people just running away terrified, leaving that world-altering text message on read,
Yeah.
what does it say about our fundamental human need for neat, tidy closure that later scribes felt compelled to add the rest of the story?